Hi, I'm Violet Crabtree, and I make claymation movies. Today we're going to learn how to make claymation puppets, and in the end of the workshop we'll have made a claymation movie. A little background on myself. I started making movies about 7 years ago, and in order to fill in some parts that we hadn't finished, I decided to learn how to do claymation. I didn't know how to do it and I hadn't been taught, so I just started doing it. The past 4 years for me have been a learning experience, and I will show you some of the things that I learned just by doing. One video that I'd like to recommend for people to watch, especially beginners, is Gumby, anything from the 50s. Gumby has been an inspiration to me because when I watched it I thought, hey, maybe I could do that. It's a little simpler, and so that's inspiring for a beginner. And it's also incredibly cute. Another really good claymation is Wallace and Gromit, especially the older ones. And they're more complex and more perfect looking. In the last 6 months, since the pandemic, my art practice has changed in that mostly I've had more time. Spent a lot of time here in my studio working on art. I had plans since winter to start a feature-length film. It's called Wild Fur. Last 6 months, drawing the storyboard in a very detailed way. Also building some very complicated puppets. I'm actually ready to start with the first animated sequence for the feature. I'll show you guys the set that I made at some point. Today we're going to get started with making a claymation puppet. And for those of you who don't know what claymation is, it is stop motion animation. And stop motion animation is a series of still photographs that when they're put together they look like they're moving. So claymation specifically is done with modeling clay, and that's what we're going to use to make the puppets today. Okay, so let's get started. Here are some things that we'll need for making a stop motion puppet. This is steel wire. You can get it at the hardware store, and it's pretty cheap. This is aluminum wire. It's made specifically for armatures, which is what we're making. An armature is basically a skeleton that goes inside of your clay puppet. The aluminum is better for stop motion. It works better, but I've worked with the steel wire and it's great, especially for beginners, and it's cheaper. So either way. Another thing we need is pliers, which also have a wire cutting capability. These two things that are sticking to the wire now are magnets, and these are pretty strong magnets. I use these to put inside the feet. What that does is it makes it so that when your puppet is standing up, if you put a piece of metal underneath, it will stand up with the magnets magnetized to the metal. And we'll talk about that more later when we get into the backdrop building portion of the workshop, which will be part 2. This is a pencil. You can use a pencil or any kind of pointy tool. And this is just for making features on the face, like nostrils and poking holes for eyes, ears, ear holes, a mouth. So that's pretty basic. Here are 2 black beads, which we're going to use for the eyes. And then of course the modeling clay, which you can choose any colors you like. Masking tape, which I'm going to use for binding up the joints of the armature. Okay, so first you have to decide what kind of puppet you want to make, how big you want to make it. And this all depends on how big of an area that you have for a set. If you have a small area to make your set, then you want to make a smaller puppet. Today we're going to make a small-ish puppet. So you want to make sure that you have enough wire For the torso, we're going to be making a human puppet today. Okay, so now we have a piece of wire, and what I'm going to do first off is crimp the ends so that we don't get poked. That just means you bend it over like that, and then you really crimp it down. Okay, so now that's safer. I'm going to grab this end of the wire with the pliers and hold on tight, and then I'm going to grab on to this looped end and I'm going to start twisting. See, I twisted it pretty tightly. And this will be the head, this loop part. Okay, that's the torso. Next we want to get a piece for the arms. Okay, so this is for the arms. So now you want to decide where the shoulders will be. This is about right here. And we're gonna just grab hold of the wire and untwist it just a little bit. Okay, so you can see that I made an opening right there. To make the arms join with the torso, I'm going to get a piece of masking tape. Now you can see that I'm wrapping the masking tape this way, and then I'm wrapping it this way. Under, over, under, over. Okay, and then you want to squeeze it real tight. While I am wrapping the masking tape, I'm also stretching it for maximum hold. Really squeezing it down there. Alright, so that's done. Here are the shoulders. The next step is to make the legs. The legs are longer than the arms, unless it's a gorilla or a monkey. Their arms are about the same length. Again, we will crimp the end so we don't get hurt. Okay, so then we want to untwist this wire where the hips will go. Pulling the masking tape under, over. Well, these legs are way too long, so first of all, I'm going to cut the legs. So I decided to make this into a human, but if you wanted to make it into an animal, like say a cat or a dog or horse, etc. For a horse, you probably would have made the neck a lot longer. Then you could leave the tail. Here's the tail. But since we're making a human, we are going to not include the tail. And instead of cutting it off, I'm just gonna wrap it around. Now it's time to start putting on the clothes. See, it's wrapped. I'm gonna do a blue shirt. And to start with the clay, you wanna pull off a piece, not too big, and flatten it out. And then you start wrapping it around. Wrap it around as tightly as you can, squish it down to get the air out. Okay, now it's time for the purple pants. When we're covering the armature with clay, we want to make sure that the wire is covered and you can't see it. If it's not in the middle of the clay, then when you bend the legs, move the shoulder, and the wire isn't in the middle of the clay, then it will expose the wire, which we don't want to see the wire. And the shoes I decided would be green. So one thing about the stop motion puppet, the kind that we're making today, is if it has 2 feet, then we're going to need to make the feet pretty big in order to keep the puppet standing up. So tiny feet are out, no tiny feet. There's our big feet, and these are the 2 magnets, and I'm just going to press them into the foot. You can see it's sticking out a little bit, you don't want to bury it. Okay, so far so good, it's standing up. As you can see, my hands are very dark colored, so I'm wiping them off. Now I decided that I wanted my person to have this bright orange skin. First I'm going to do the neck. Okay, there's a head. And then for hands, we're not going to make individual fingers because they just mush together with the clay. That's more advanced. We're going go with the pot holder, I call them, style hands, because they just mush together. All those fingers, it's hard to keep them apart. There's a hand, but it's got a thumb. So the next thing we're gonna do is work on the face. So we wanna make sure that the head has a chin. Next, I'm gonna do the holes for the eyes. You wanna make them kind of close together. Shaping like that. Here's the nose. And I'm going to poke holes for the nostrils. Now I'm gonna put the eyes in. You wanna make sure that they're pointing the same way. Alright. How does he look? It's kind of funny. He's a funny looking guy. Okay, so then we're gonna do some ears. The ears. I'm going to poke some holes for the ears. And if you want, you can give the guy some lips. I think this guy needs some lips. So just roll it into a worm. He's gonna have yellow hair, so we're gonna do yellow eyebrows. Give him some hair now. Flattening out the clay. Now I gotta balance them out a little bit. Maybe you can make the knees bend. Knees are bent like a person. Arms are bent. Every time you bend the puppet, the clay will deform a little bit, so you just gotta go smooth it out, smooth it out. Yeah, so if you want the puppet to have better stand-up ability, bending the knees a little bit and bending the arms a little bit will help. So that is our stop motion puppet.